Hey everyone, welcome back to another edition of the Patriots Report. I'm Christopher Price, the Boston Globe. We welcome in once again our draft guru, Joe DeLeone. After a week at the Combine, I have some big picture questions for you, and we can get to those in a little bit, Joe. Winners and losers from the week, how much things, if at all, have changed for you when you look at the draft board pre-Combine as opposed to post-Combine. But I want to get into a very specific couple of Patriots questions because obviously they're one of the teams, they're sitting at number 4. There's going to be a lot of conversation about what they do or they don't do heading into free agency in the draft and the whole team building process. The big story that people are still talking about up here, I think, is Will Campbell's arm length. He
Hmm.
measured in just under 33 inches, left tackle, all SEC left tackle at LSU. He does have shorter arms though. When you look at him against a traditional the traditional tackle's body. And he said, look, I acknowledge the fact I don't have traditional tackle arms, but you can't look at any of my tape and see a play where I was beaten because I had shorter arms, which, you take your hat off to the guy and you say, all right, fine, that's okay. But specific to the Patriots, does the fact that Campbell doesn't check one of those admittedly traditional boxes mean that he will have slightly less overall value at 4 for the Patriots than someone like a Mason Graham?
I think overall, just like looking at the whole scope of the offensive line class, I think Campbell's a great player. I think there's some decent offensive linemen, but I think they should prioritize defense. There's some really blue chip guys, and you just mentioned one of them. Mason Graham steps right in, and he could be one of the best defensive tackles in the next 2 years very quickly because of the leverage that he plays with, this wrestler's mentality that he has. I do think that Will Campbell, and it sounds like right now that they're very high on him. They're not worried about the arm length. Coming out of the combine, that's one of the things that's been brought up that some teams don't care. It seems like the Patriots are one of those teams.
Hmm.
I think it would be a fine pick at 4 because it's a high floor pick. That's what he's been all throughout college. He's been a high floor prospect. He's been super reliable. He's been super consistent because his technique is awesome. His understanding of just nuance of how to win with his hands and pass protection and how to counter, all of those things are at an elite level. There's a reason why he is so highly regarded. Him going at 4, it's not a bad pick. You're trying to get quality starters to build around Drake May, especially on offense, and especially when your offensive line was as weak as it was last season. I think to the question about his arm length, it doesn't really affect his draft stock that much, but I sit in the camp that I think that he is better off playing guard. I do not think that it is as much of a knock as everyone wants to make it out to be that, oh my God, it's so disrespectful to make it seem like this guy who was great at tackle can't play tackle. When you're under that threshold, you need rare athletic traits to counter that. He's got the long speed. He tested really well. He jumped really well. His flexibility is where it kind of comes into question. He hunches over a little bit. He plays a little bit high at times. I think that he is going to be better in a phone booth than trying to ask him to win against much twitchier edge rushers that he's going to be seeing in space in the NFL. He could end up working out, but I just think that we should try to prepare him and to have him play at his best. The best example I come back to is Peter Skoronski. We tried this before. We did this the whole time with Peter Skoronski, and we said, this kid's a tackle, this kid's a tackle, this kid's a tackle. He had some of the best tackle tape out of anybody in his class. Lo and behold, in the NFL, he's playing guard.
Yeah, it is. He's an interesting guy, and I think that there are a couple of comps that come to mind. And admittedly, I'm looking at him through a New England perspective here, and so it's probably not fair. And we're not. I don't want to go too far down the line with this, but I talked to Dante Scarnecchia a little
Mm.
bit, and he mentioned both Logan Mankins and Joe Tooney, two collegiate tackles who enjoyed great success moving inside, but also at some point in their careers, they were able to kick out and play a little tackle. We saw Joe Tooney do it last year with the Chiefs. Now, all that being said, Logan Mankins was taken 32nd overall, and Joe Tooney was taken on day 2. So you measure value versus, the overall player. Both of those guys are great. Both
Mm.
of those guys had great careers, are having great careers. I'm trying to reconcile that with the idea of, well, what about a defensive game changer like you mentioned, specific to Mason Graham? There are a lot of guys like that in this class, but Mason Graham to me feels like the kind of guy that Mike Vrabel can hang his hat on in the same way that Bill Belichick would hang his hat on Richard Seymour and say, that is what I want my team to be like. That's my first meaningful draft pick. This is the guy who I want to be identified with moving forward.
Well, I think the biggest part here with the Patriots is what are your needs and what are the best players available? It's a defensive class. The Patriots do need to address offensive line at some point. They need to maybe do that in free agency. They need to address receiver. Just because they need to address those positions doesn't mean that they have to do it with the fourth overall pick. There are plenty of names that they could get maybe by trading back into the end of the first round for the offensive guard or tackle spots on this team. Maybe if they just waited until day two, there's plenty of options if they wanted to double dip to try and address it. But this is a very heavily weighted defensive class. All of the elite players are on the defensive side of the football. There's some decent prospects that could be good starters on teams on the offensive side of the ball. But all the guys that we talk about in the bucket of, wow, this guy could go on to be a consistent all pro, Will Johnson, Mason Graham, maybe we could even throw in Shamar Stewart and Michael Williams, who are extremely gifted, but don't really have that college production. Anybody, Travis Hunter also, by the way, goes in that conversation. I value him as a corner. With all of those types of prospects that are in the mix, it makes so much more sense for a team like the Patriots to just go with the best players available when you have so many other holes. Also have to add Abdul Carter, forgot to include him, but he might not be on the board for the Patriots.
Well, I want to kind of fast forward to that a little bit here. Your opinion, who do you think goes top three right now in no particular order?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to be some combination of Abdul Carter, Cam Ward, and then really for me, the Giants are the wild card here. Whether or not, and part of it, look, it's whether or not they address quarterback in free agency or they
Mm-hmm.
make a trade or something. I don't know what, but there are more and more people up here in New England who are starting to say, well, let's say if they go after Shedeur Sanders. I say if they take, for whatever reason, if they're, I don't want to say bullied into taking Shedeur Sanders, I don't think it's maybe the best possible fit for them. But if they take Shedeur Sanders, if you're New England, do you take that card, sign Travis Hunter's name to it, and just run it to the podium at that point?
I think absolutely. And first to kind of talk about what you were just pitching there for scenarios, I think the Giants are the most desperate team in the top five. If you look at the lack of success over the last couple of years, you need to do something that's going to inspire confidence in the fan base in the front office. And the way that you do that is by getting the most physically gifted quarterback in the class in Cam Ward to try and at least get somebody who's in the mix for the offensive rookie of the year at the end of the year to put up a bunch of big highlights by connecting with Malik Neighbors. They need to trade up. And I think that they're going to try to be aggressive to trade up. At number two, it seems like the Browns have a lot more interest in taking a quarterback this year than I think many expected, and especially that I expected. That was one of the things that I heard, that they really like Cam Ward. They really want to get a quarterback because if they try to cut ties with Deshaun Watson, they have to eat that contract until I believe it's the next 4 years. So they need a cheap option. Trying to go with a stopgap free agent for 4 years is a brutal decision for them to go with. I still wouldn't be shocked. I know that there's this speculation that Shedeur Sanders' stock is falling. I think he was very deliberate in how he was handling himself in certain interviews, and he wanted to turn certain teams away, and he wanted to keep certain teams very, very interested. I think the teams that like him are not having the same interviews as the ones that are currently complaining about his demeanor in those conversations. So the Browns, if they miss out on Cam Ward and they don't trade up to one overall themselves, Shedeur Sanders makes a lot of sense. And I would also then be very shocked if Abdul Carter makes it past that fourth pick and if he's on the board for the Patriots. To me, if it's Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, one of the two, that's who the Patriots need to go with. Those guys are game-changing defensive prospects.
I don't think Carter's going to be there. Hunter, for
I agree.
me, is there's no one else in this either draft or free agent class that you can point to and you can say, we'll get another one of him. He's a singularly unique, and I'm not just talking about the ability to play both sides of the ball, but he fundamentally has Tyreek Hill speed.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, he can also play cornerback as well. So he's the one guy in this draft where you can't say, oh well, we'll just go get another one of Travis Hunter. There's a Travis Hunter type out there. We'll get him in day two. He for me is completely unique, and that's one of the reasons why I say, look, I can overlook some of the Coach Prime induced baggage that might come along with him and the missteps that are going to happen to any rookie in the National Football League in their first year, I want all of it. If I'm a Patriots fan, if I'm Mike Vrabel, if I'm a Patriots fan, we talked about Mason Graham before, and that'd be great, and that'd be a great safe pick, and he'd be a guy who you could build around for the next decade. Travis Hunter's a special player. Travis Hunter is very unique. Tell people a little bit about maybe something that the casual fan might not know about this guy and what he can do at the next level.
Well, on the field, the thing to know about him is he's just got unreal instincts at corner. I think he's going to be a corner in the NFL because it's harder to find corners that can play like him with the length that he has, with the closing speed and the change of direction ability that he can just stop on a dime, plant and go, come down on the football, and also make plays because his hands are so good because he plays as a receiver. I think his athleticism is strong enough for him to contribute with a very limited route tree on offense every so couple series. I don't think he can play both in the NFL. Not from the fact of it being too many snaps, but for it being the fact of it's hard to try and prepare on a week by week basis of being in corner meetings and receiver meetings, offensive meetings, defensive meetings. I don't think it's going to be doable for him. I think it'll be too much. You want to be really good at one thing, and you're going to get passed by if you're splitting time trying to improve at both and trying to watch film to play both positions. But off the field for Patriots fans, if this is the guy, the reason why I even like this pick even more for any team picking in the top five, he's an extremely polarizing player for a good reason. I don't know how many Patriots fans are going to know who this is, but like Kai Cenat, who is a streamer who does like a ton of Twitch streams and plays a lot of video games. Travis Hunter is on that type of a trajectory of recognition with younger audiences. If you're the Patriots and you see a guy like this who's not only amazing on the field and is going to potentially be an all-pro if he pans out, you're also going to have and I know the Patriots aren't short on people talking about them, but you're going to have somebody that is going to have constant positive, sometimes bad attention, but positive attention because of what his personality is like.
Elliot Wolf had a great line, and I will give him credit for this. And for the rest of Travis Hunter's career, he said, "Look, I think he can major in one and minor in the other." When it talks about
Yeah.
playing, on one side of the ball or the other, and I think that makes a lot of sense, at least at the start of his career, because I don't think the physical. You bring up a really good point, and he addressed this kind of in a roundabout way. It's like, look, I take care of my body, I do what I need to do, hot tub, cold tub, whatever the case may be. Splitting your time at the next level, I think, is really important. And then one more Travis Hunter related thing. Vrabel on the NFL Network broadcast talked about meeting with Travis Hunter, and Vrabel kind of gave him the, some of us have played the two-way thing before in the National Football League. It's in Vrabel kind of joked about it. I think that Vrabel would be a guy who could make it work because again,
Mhm.
there's going to be a lot to deal with there. There's an excess of personality with someone like Travis Hunter, and with a coach like Vrabel, I think he would be able to find a really nice happy medium there with him.
Yeah, that's also why this has been, I think, a recurring projected pick on a lot of people's mock drafts because talk about like a coach fit for Travis Hunter to work. We just mentioned there having Vrabel had played a little bit of goal line tight end, not to the same extent as Travis Hunter, but that's
Exactly.
kind of where that comes into play. But a head coach who clearly values players that are going to give full effort and are going to go all out in order to help the team win. I think that that's where that connection plays as well. I just hope that wherever he ends up playing and how he ends up playing in the NFL, that there is a very direct approach to deploying him. And it's not just scatterbrained of like, oh, maybe we'll put him in on this series. Maybe we'll have him do this or that. There needs to be a very planned approach to helping this kid succeed.
All right, post combine, give me your most likely Patriots scenario when it comes to the draft, and then the best possible scenario when it comes to
You're
the draft.
you're talking just overall or specifically in the first round?
Just overall, and maybe with a focus on the first round, and specifically, I'm also curious, and this kind of we've kind of alluded to it a little bit here. Do you trade down out of four if your guy's not there? If what are you thinking happens if you're Elliot Wolf, and then what do you think is going to happen?
I think best case scenario is if they do end up picking one of these premier defenders, Travis Hunter, Mason Gray, maybe Abdul Carter. Actually, the absolute best case scenario is ending up with Abdul Carter at that fourth overall pick and then coming back in the second round, getting a player like Jaden Higgins from
Mhm.
Iowa State, who's a 6'4" receiver who tested extremely well. Or maybe somebody like Matthew Golden or Luther Burden is still on the board at receiver, and you're able to get a steal with one of those prospects that slides just a little bit. And then for them to potentially address a corner and try to get a little, somebody to play opposite of Christian Gonzalez, I think that's something that they would need to do not super early, but maybe in the third, fourth round. If there's a possibility that Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky, who had the fastest 40 time, was still on the board. I think that somebody like Trey Amos from Old Miss is a
Mhm.
prospect who tested well, who could fit playing opposite of Christian Gonzalez. Absolute worst case is if they came back around and they got their guy at number one, whoever it might be, someone, one of these premier defenders, if they came back around and all of the top receivers are gone, all four of the top receivers are gone, Luther Burden, Tedero McMillan, Matthew Golden, Emeka Buga, all of them are gone. And then all of the tackles are gone, which would include Josh Simmons, Kelvin Banks, um, Josh Connerly,
Connerly,
and Will
yeah.
Campbell. Yeah, if all of those guys are completely off the board, that would be a worst case scenario because when you're sitting there after that first big grouping of receivers and that first big grouping of linemen, it starts to thin out and you're kind of drawing at straws and hoping that some of these guys can pan out. And there's also not as many guys that are as athletic as the group that I just mentioned. So that would definitely be the worst case when you're trying to improve this O line in this receiver room.
It felt like that's a little bit of what happened to him last year in that run of offensive linemen, and they got in on
Yeah.
it late, and they ended up settling for Robinson and Wallace. Now, obviously the jury's still out on both of them, but they probably would have liked to have been at the head of that class as opposed to behind that class. For years, with Bill Belichick at the helm, we were able to, and we've even joked about this before, we were able to identify these mid to late round guys who are Belichick types, whether they were left-footed punters out of Navy or former college lacrosse players. Is there a guy for you who is a late round Patriots type of player who New England fans should keep an eye on? Again, they're not as easy to point out as, they might have been under Bill, but for a guy like Mike Vrabel or Terrell Williams or Josh McDaniels or even Jeremy Springer, the special teams coordinator, is there a guy out there that you can point to and say, you know what? He's a day two, day three guy that Patriots fans might want to take a look at.
I think the most cliche one possible is Kyle Monangai, the running back from Rutgers. Couldn't get more cliche than the Patriots' way of drafting a Rutgers guy. I think though why he works specifically though, he didn't test that well. He's going to go under the radar. He's probably going to end up being a fifth, sixth, maybe even later pick in this draft. He does everything right, and he does everything that you need a running back to do in order to earn snaps and to earn touches. He blocks his butt off in pass protection, even in the run game. He's got underrated hands. It could be an impactful as a receiver. He has really great vision and he's physical. He's not afraid of contact. He is going to run through a dude's face in order to pick up yards. So if I'm looking at, he's obviously not Derrick Henry who Vrabel had for a long time, but if I'm looking at what embodies the Patriot way and the Mike Vrabel way for running the football, it's somebody like Kamanungai. I really think that he is going to go on to be the Bucky Irving and the Kyron Williams of this class. And he needs a team that sees a prospect for the effort that he's giving and the instincts that he has rather than the athletic traits that you take him late and then hope he ends up working out. And at the very least, he's your second running back and he's contributing and he's able to provide 40 or 50 yards on a good day in any facet possible.
See, the if this was 3, 4, 5 years ago, I would have come at you with Cam Scottaboo.
That's
It,
another one.
he feels like, and it's a cliche, but I mean, you look at him and he feels like the kind of guy who,
Right.
he's a Nate Ebner for a new generation, where he makes 3 or 4 plays a year on special teams for you that end up, turning games around. What do you think of him? Because obviously, coming off the college football playoff, people were sky high on him. And I tweeted out something, oh, this guy's great. People are like, oh, he's a first round guy. I'm like, well, let's just kind of pump the
Yeah.
brakes
Too
here.
much.
He had a great year and he capped it off with that unbelievable game in the postseason. Where do you see him right now? He feels like one of those guys who's late day two-ish, early day three if everything breaks for him.
I think realistically, the earliest he's going to go is in the third round, just because this running back class is so deep. And then naturally, even though there's guys that are going to go early in the running back class, they're always going to slide in any draft class. There's going to be a good big run though on day two, and I think that Scadaboo could be a part of that. Likely though, fourth round also is in the mix. What makes him so good is the contact balance, and it's
Mhm.
the feet that he plays with. The fact that he's able to roll off of tacklers is what makes him so tough. The long speed's the problem. He didn't run a 40 for a reason. I think that we are expecting him to be like a 4.6 guy at best. And that's something you bring up. This is something that you need to have to be a primary back on a roster, is to have that separation speed. He could end up being productive in the NFL, but it's just something that could possibly hold back any production from him. I do hold like him very close to my heart though, because I love him, and so much so that when he was at Sac State, I was doing a little bit of consulting for a scouting agency that was recommending prospects to agents, and he was one of the guys that early on I watched his tape and I'm like, man, this kid's going to be really good in college, and if he moves up to the FBS, and he's going to be somebody who just sticks on a roster.
Mhm.
Maybe he doesn't end up becoming a team's primary back, but he does all of the little things right, kind of like Monungai, enough for him to be a team's really good second running back that you just constantly see go from roster to roster, because they all want to have a high floor, physical, high effort player like Cam Scadaboo. So I'm a big fan of his. I definitely couldn't get there with what you just mentioned, where there were a lot of folks that suddenly after his crazy playoff run that he was all of a sudden a possible first rounder.
He is a gift for any special teams coach out
Yes.
there. And I think if he does not look to make his name on special teams right out of the gate, I think he's crazy. But I think that he feels like the kind of guy. He's going to be in the league for 10 years. He's going to be a special team stud. He's going to be a backup running back. He just you can see the process. You can kind of see it evolve for him a little bit. I want to ask you if you have a personal draft binky, for lack of a better term. Do you have a guy out there? And I'm not just talking about the Patriots here, but kind of
Mm-hmm.
a broad brush second, a day two, day three guy that no one's talking about, that's under the radar right now, that popped a little bit at the combine, that, if you're buying stock in this guy, get on board now because he's going to be important come August, September, October.
One guy, he's picked up a little bit of steam, but I don't think that he, after his Senior Bowl performance, but I don't think he's like really fully there in just the general fans' perspective on prospects. Darius Alexander from Toledo is my arguably my favorite prospect in this class. He is tall, he is long, he's built like Chris Jones. I think he could be the next Chris Jones if he goes in the third round. And we remember when he came out of Mississippi State, the expectation for him was like, hey, this guy's got some upside. He's a nice pass rusher. And then he goes on to be one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL because of his profile and the way that he's able to move. Darius Alexander showed us what he can do in one-on-one situations as a pass rusher at the Senior Bowl. He was just smoking guys. Like, this is somebody who was using his hands and using his quick burst and that flexibility to win reps. This is a player, and I put out his tape. I post a lot of like really quick highlight reels of top plays I notice when I'm watching film. For anyone who wants to know more about Darius Alexander, go to my account at Joe DeLeone and type in Darius Alexander. One of the plays I put in there, he has a pick six against Pitt. He picked off a quarterback and ran it back at, I think, like 315 is what he's listed at. So this guy can move, and he can move in space, and he can move and get up to speed pretty quickly. So Darius Alexander, I will continue to bang the table for.
Darius Alexander out of Toledo. I love it. Let's go big picture now, kind of broad brush a little bit. Give me some winners and give me some losers from your experience at the combine when it came to their performance. It helped them out. Performance kind of maybe dropped them off. Whether it was, on field, with the media, with
Mm-hmm.
coaches, what kind of stuff are you hearing?
The two guys that I think a lot of people were expecting to be enamored with, that we were confirmed on that they were athletic freaks. Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher from Texas A&M, I think he's going to be a top 12 pick at the minimum. He had insane numbers, over 265, and ran a sub 5.640. He was flying and moving really fluidly, jumped really well. Nick Emanwari, the safety from South Carolina, he ran the best combine performance ever for a safety. I will go as far as to say that he was a 6'3", 220-pound safety,
Built
built
like a
like a
linebacker.
linebacker.
Big dude. Big
In,
dude.
completely insane that he's this big and ran a 4.38. Two guys though that are dropping, that are kind of sliding down, that had nothing to do with on-field performances. James Pierce Jr. had a great testing performance at the combine, but from what I've heard, one team specifically, they're not very big fans of his work ethic, his commitment. There are from team sources at Tennessee that it seems like from the University of Tennessee that had told some of the teams that I talked to that they just don't really think that he is somebody who, despite his talent, is super locked in and is motivated and wants to become an elite NFL player. And then Mike Green Jr., it's easy to look up. He has a legal history of issues. It was brought up in question to him in the media availability on his thoughts on those situations. He was allegedly accused of sexual assault, and it sounds like that those interviews and the way that he had addressed that with teams in interviews didn't really give teams much of a great feeling that they felt like that they could move forward with drafting him. So both those guys didn't do so well in the interviews. That's the biggest takeaway from the combine usually, is that who quietly might have hurt themselves because those interviews didn't go well.
Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, my friend. Let people know where they can read you, where they can see these film breakdowns, and where they can follow you on social media.
Yeah, you can follow me at Joe DeLeone on Twitter, and then head on over to the A to Z Sports Film Room channel, where my co-host Ryan Roberts and I we do a ton of great quick reaction breakdowns of all the draft topics. We've been doing scouting report episodes for a lot of these guys. We just went over 40K subs, so we're juiced up, and it's going to be a fun way to finish things out. Chris, really appreciate so much getting to catch up with you. This was awesome, and I'm sure we're going to get to talk soon.
Definitely. My podcast partner, Chris Hogan, wants a chance to ask you about some of these wide receivers as well. So
Love it.
we're going to have to connect at least once more between now and the draft. Once again, my friend, take care, and we will talk again very, very soon.